Hello everyone. Welcome to the TSMU Q&A series where you get to ask the questions to our special guests. My name is Sky and I'll be your host today. Now, you can ask your burning questions via text or a voice question via our TSMU Discord. To join the Discord, it is discord.gg/TSMU, and be sure to hop into the text channel where it says ask stream questions and send those away. And today we have a very, very special guest. She is a Valorant commentator based out of Wisconsin, someone who you may be familiar with in VCTs and Nerd Street events. The one, the only, Mimi, aEvilcat Wermcrantz. Welcome, Mimi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. I don't know what specifically to say, but it should just be a fun time. Always good to get some questions out there and to just talk things through. Yeah.
Yeah, and while people get their questions in, Mimi, why don't you tell us about yourself and what you do in your role as an esports commentator?
Sure. So I just provide commentary over live matches as they happen. Normally, I'm working Valorant or CS:GO. I've done some other games occasionally, but Valorant and CS are kind of my big ones. So it's mostly the FPS games, and it's just kind of providing the live analysis, the live hype like that. Normally, you do it with another person, with your duo, and it's kind of that team working together to kind of better the audience's understanding, build the energy over it, and I guess just to be additive to the experience instead of just it being like you're watching something, making it feel like a real sport, making it feel like a real event instead of just a game you're looking at.
Yeah, and I think that's really important in terms of getting people hyped in and understanding the game itself. I think someone for me, myself, when I'm watching a game for the very first time, I rely on the commentators to guide me through, understanding, what is going on, and also getting me hyped up, being able to hear those strong voices and, getting really excited when there's a really awesome play going on. So I think people like you, esports commentators, are very, very important to the esports ecosystem. As we're still waiting for additional questions, I wanted to get to know about you in terms of how you got into esports.
Sure. So for me, I've been an avid viewer of esports for a while. It's around like when I was like little, probably in like middle school, just playing CS, playing games like that, or on the Xbox or whatever. I started to get into watching esports, watching the CS majors, watching those big events, and then it started to come to fruition when I was, I don't know, like a year ago. I was in junior year of high school. It's COVID, so everything was online. So I was at home a ton, and I was always watching like the ESL CS:GO Pro League season 13. I loved the commentary on it. I thought it was really hype. I thought it was really fun. It was something I was already interested in. And then a friend of mine, she runs tournaments with a community in Valorant called Galorants. They were down a caster. I had like tried casting just kind of for fun once before. And she was like, "Hey, do you want to try it out? Do you want to help out with this tournament? We need someone." And I was like, "Screw it." Called off work the next day, went for it. It was something I absolutely loved. And I was like, I want to keep doing this. So I started reaching out, kind of just harassing random tournament organizers to try and get an opportunity. Did a couple small things, lots of unpaid work. And then I got the opportunity after meeting Miss Harvey, who works for CLG. She has a ton of connections in esports, and she managed to get me on the VCT Game Changers. And that's kind of how I got noticed for the first time. And then I started just getting bigger and bigger events after that in Valorant. I've done, like I said, I've done some other one-off games, but it's mostly Valorant. That's my big thing, with some CS:GO in there too.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear, especially, when you're trying to find that place where you're already passionate about the community, the scene, the games, and you find your place that you're like, wow, I'm doing a really great job. Maybe this is the play. Speaking about esports commentating, I have one question from Beard. Beard asks, what do you do to prep for work? Do you practice with VODs? Do you just go into it?
Sure. So I think it depends on the caliber of tournament that I'm working, and it's not to say that I'm like changing how I work depending on the viewership or depending on the teams, because I try and treat every broadcast the same, but it's a matter of how much preparation you can do. With shows like the VCT, you're normally only doing 1 or 2 best of 3s, and you know specifically the match you're going to have or the possibility. In that case, I'm watching VODs of those teams. I'm watching their passings, learning their tendencies, taking notes on them, and then kind of starting to get the general storylines, because it is about crafting it from just a game into a story, and a big part of that starts in preparations. Do these teams have history? Do these players have something special? What's the motivation here? What's on the line for this event? And you can really get nitty gritty with that when you work events like the VCT. It's also outside of that kind of prep work on your own. It's also prep work with your co-caster. Any show, no matter what, an hour before I'm on a call with my co-caster, we talk things through. We're like, all right, what were you thinking of your stories for this? What are the points we want to bring about these teams? Who are our players to watch? And also just kind of just shooting it a little bit, just getting used to each other, warming up, just talking to each other and continuing that synergy, especially if it's someone you're not working with. If it's tournaments that aren't like the VCT, where it's harder, you don't know your specific match, it's just having a general understanding of the scene. I do a lot of tier 2 tournaments in Valorant with NSG. I used to do a bunch of stuff with Knights too, so I'm very aware of the teams. I'm very aware of the players. I keep active on Twitter. I mean, I'm just constantly immersing myself, and a lot of the players are my friends as well. So I get to know them, and I just kind of have to have that kind of cerebral understanding, because a lot of the time you only know your match 5 minutes before. You're gonna have very little research time. So it's just a matter of kind of being a student of the scene, I suppose, and trying to stay up to date as much as possible. And when you know your specific match, it's also in making sure you get that one very nailed down.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned about being in high school and finding that place in being an esports commentator, and then transitioning over. I guess my question to you is, like, as you were picking up these jobs and all these commentating jobs while you were in school, how are you able to balance the two, knowing that there is a lot that goes into
Sure.
prepping for your next day where you're meeting with another commentator, you're getting ready for the next matches?
Sure. So to be honest, it was when I started commentary, it was my senior year of high school. I already had pretty good grades, and it was like second semester that I started, so I wasn't taking that many classes. I was taking like a half course load. And for the most part, I was able to kind of cruise along. So probably not like the Cinderella story there. But I tried to put as much into my work. That obviously has to come first. But right now, I'm in a very good, very unique position, I suppose, because I'm able to basically take a gap year from college and just focus on this, try and make this a reality. Right? Technically, it's a gap semester, whatever. But I'm just working on this, trying to focus this in, because it is something that's hard to balance. I think if you're a college student, or if you're a high school student, it's start small. Obviously, you want to be able to take every gig you can get, but if you can find an organizer that's working afternoons, if it's working weekends, I mean, the esports hours, gamers are on demon hours at all times. Tournaments are at dumb times. So it actually normally works with school. You just have to make sure you're balancing it out. You have to really put extra work in on those days that you're not casting, because broadcast can get really long. If you have a weekend tournament, it might be 2 8 9 hour days, and you're not going to have a lot on top of that, especially if you want to like go out with friends or do something like that. So I would say it's tough. It's just prioritize your gigs. What's important to you? What is going to further your career? Because a lot of times, once you start to grow, once you're in those early stages, you'll get multiple offers, and it's balancing. Do I make money from this? So how much money I make? Can they pay my day rate? And also, who am I working with? What is going to get me more viewership? What is going to help me to grow specifically? Because it's about that kind of continuation, and it's about, I guess, prioritization.
Yeah, and talking about prioritization and having this crazy schedule in terms of esports doesn't sleep, in a sense. There's always going to be tournaments 24/7. I guess my question for you, and share your advice and your mantra in terms of being able to balance yourself so there isn't that burnout, there isn't that
Sure.
you're like, there's a lot going on, I need to take a break, or else I'm just not gonna enjoy what I'm doing anymore.
I mean, esports has a grind culture, and it sucks, to be honest. A lot of people are going to tell you, like, you got to work your ass off 24/7, and you can't stop. And that's like, it's true to an extent, because you got to be grinding, you got to stay at it, especially when you're in commentary. Commentary, I would say, in esports, besides maybe pro play itself, is one of the most competitive things. There are not a lot of commentary slots at the top level, and there are many people who want their hand at it, and there's many very talented people who want their hand at it. So to an extent, you do have to grind, but I think it's kind of falling back to what I said about picking which events are important, which events work with you. And to an extent, it's about knowing your own worth, right? How much is your time worth in way of the money you're making? How much is your time worth in way of the exposure you're getting? Because I know exposure bucks is like the meme, and you don't want to work for free, but you'll have to when you're getting started, to be honest. And I think it's just about kind of knowing in your head what it is. And a lot of that comes with talking with your peers. Reach out to people who cast. Reach out to people who are at the higher level. You'll be surprised at the people who reply because people want to help new people. Like in the Valorant community, Van Silly, he's a big guy in the scene. He's been casting for years. He helped me a lot when I was starting out. So did Simo. There's a lot of casters that want to help newer people out. Even just reaching out to other people who work in the scene and just like, hey, do you want to get together, cast over VOD together, and then just review it? Try and do things on our own time because it's not just bound to the tournaments. It's if you have a tight schedule, try and fit in the other stuff. Well, you're not working an event. Try and fit that in because that's a lot easier to schedule around your schedule than gigs are. And if you can build those connections, because I mean, connections is everything in this. You're never going to have like a resume. There's very few circumstances where you're applying. Building that outside of your actual airtime is very important. And once you're more known, then it's a lot easier to balance the actual events and be a little more choosy with the events you're taking. And it's a tough balance, especially when you're starting out, but it's doable.
Yeah, and talking about resumes, Kenzie has a question for you. He said, or she, sorry, was creating a portfolio something you needed when you were starting out? And if so, how did you go about making one?
I made a resume for when I was starting out. It was completely useless. I used it once. Don't make a resume if you're casting. Some weirdos will want them, but no, it doesn't really happen because casting is still a situation where it's about kind of who you know, right? Because it's about there are hiring managers and it's kind of in the eye of the beholder. Who do they like? Who do they think wants to come up? Who do they want to give an opportunity? There's not like a clear application process. Some gigs have it, but most of the times gigs you can apply for, it depends. I think like Super Smash Bros. And FGC, there's more opportunities. I'm talking FPS. That's where my experience is from in CS and Valorant. Most of the big stuff, you're not going to be able to apply for it. What you should make, though, a reel of your casting, 2 minutes long, to the point. Hiring managers, there's going to be a bazillion people who want them. Make it worth their time. Show your best moments. Vary it up. You want like a moment of you showing some personality, do a little funny, something like that. Show some of your play-by-play if that's what you're into. Show some of your color. Show a good analytical moment. Show some of your history, your hosting. Show some of your interviewing. I mean, if anyone's interested, like you can always DM me on Twitter. I can send you my reel and show what you're looking for in that. But 2 minutes. Maybe put some music in the background, not some distracting music, something like that you can, because, okay, I'm going to try to kind of change my point a little bit. Early on, you're going to have to cold call a lot of people. It's very awkward. I hate it. I don't like it at all. But just reaching out to people like in Twitter DMs, you see they're your hiring manager for something, you see they're the broadcast producer, whatever. You can reach out to them. A lot of the times, if you know friends who can hook you up with them, that's great too. But you want something that can sell yourself quickly without wasting your time because they're not going to go scrub through your 2-hour-long VOD most of the time. I think a reel is really helpful starting out. Later on, you don't need to use your reel. I don't remember the last time I sent my reel to a place. Actually, I did, but that was when I was applying for another game, not Valorant, where I'm a little more established. So real good. And okay, the other thing is keeping a record of the events you do. You don't have to use this, but just personally have a spreadsheet. What was the event? What was the date? Who ran it? What was your role? How much did you do? It's good for keeping your own records. Once you start to get paid, you obviously have to keep those records as well. But just knowing the gigs you've done and having a little reel or a little clip you can send in is way more beneficial than a resume is ever going to be because building those connections is always going to be more important than selling yourself on a piece of paper.
Yeah, and great advice on that. And I think you mentioned a lot in terms of networking and having those connections. For aspiring commentators, what would you say in terms of what's the best way to network with fellow commentators or hiring managers?
That's a tough one because there's no clear-cut like easy method to get to know people. A lot of games have servers, like Discord servers that you can go to. Valorant has a community that's called Talorant. It has a lot of the casters in there. There's a Discord called broadcast.gg that's for general games. Most of the gigs in there, they're not the best. You're probably not going to get a gig out of it, but there's people there that you can find and you can probably message. Also, Twitter DM people. You're probably going to get stuck in message request hell. People are going to ego you. People aren't going to see your message. Whatever, you go next, you try again. There's tons of people that are willing to help. You just have to find those people. And the other thing is find peers who are maybe a little higher or the same level as you in their kind of journey with casting and get together with them. just cast with them, because just making friends is always gonna work better than kind of artificially reaching out to people, I guess, because once you make friends, you can kind of they'll be willing to connect you with people. And the other thing is, once you start working more and more broadcasts, you'll find people through that. You'll find like the producer you worked with, the observers you worked with, the person who actually hired you. You'll get that connection from all of them. And if you do well, they might refer to you at other people, or you could even ask them like, hey, is there anyone that we could talk to? There's no direct path is what I'm saying. I know I'm kind of saying a whole lot of nothing, but there's some Discords to get you started. There's some people you can message on Twitter or message on Discord or wherever you can find them to get you started. But from then on there, it's kind of your own gumption, I guess.
You know, I think everything you've said has been super helpful in terms of giving people insight about esports commentating. You know, making friends, you know, making those connections, those memorable moments. Moving over to another question asked by Ari, what is the most memorable moment of your casting career? Was it a gameplay moment, caster banter?
I think the my best memory with casting. So first of all, I'm an onliner. I started casting during the online era. I've never worked a LAN yet. I'm going to soon, very, very soon. But thus far I've never worked a LAN. So all my stuff is going to be online, and all the friends I've made through this for the most part are going to be online. But I think the coolest moment for me was getting to cast 100 Thieves versus XSET VCT. What was it? VCT what's it called? Regional finals. This one, the most recent one, the Berlin qualifier is what it was. And somehow, some way, me and Tanner managed to snake our way into getting to cast the qualifying match. And it was just a really cool one. It was a good game. It was the best that we've ever felt casting as a duo. Like it was just hitting. The energy was good. The hype was good. And that like last map, I was just feeling it. It was looking really good. It was a huge comeback by XSET. They run it out. Tanner has a really sick call where he's like, "How is your German? You're going to Berlin." And then after that, it was just like me, him, the producer, everyone in the call. We were just feeling fantastic. We were feeling great. And I don't know. It was just a really cool moment. It's one of those days where you wrap the broadcast with just a smile on your face and you're just feeling that. I will say that moment comes to mind, but since I described that emotion, I'm pulling up another one. I'm cheating. I'm doing a little cheating. But the other big one for me was after my first kind of big event, which is the VCT Game Changers, which is like a 50K women's event. It was the first one that Riot did, and it was the first like not Humegalol event that I worked. And after that day, it was like the first time that a lot of people had noticed me, and a lot of people I'd looked up to were like following me on Twitter or messaging me. Things like there was a fairly positive reception for how new I was in the community, and we had to go on a trip. I was going on a trip with my mom, getting dragged to my grandparents' house, and afterwards I was just like scrolling through Twitter, like so many people were reaching out. It was like just a really overwhelming emotion after wrapping that show, and I don't know, just felt cool, and all the friends I made too. It was just a good one.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when you have these highlights in your career. It keeps you going. It keeps the grind going. And it makes you a better person overall on your own. So really excited to hear what you have to say in terms of your highlights. For me, like being able to hear, stories like this is just heartwarming for me. I think it's really exciting to see someone so passionate within the space and be able to, share those stories with others. In terms of another question we have, Akshan asks, before the match, during technical checks or rehearsals, what do you like to go over or address with the co-caster?
I'm gonna grab my notebook. So the first thing is, it depends on if you're working with a new person or if you're working with someone you work with consistently. I think consistent duos are the wave. So if you can find someone you can do it with a lot, it's a great way to grow as a pair. But if you can't, if it's someone new, what you should do is you should reach out to them individually. You're like, hey, the day before, do we want to get together, cast a VOD together? Get used to each other's style, get used to that. And then if you can't do it the day before, you meet the day of. Again, you talk about teams, you talk about your expectations, your storylines, the players you're going to look at, and then kind of the flow you're going through. You look at the run of show as well, because a lot of shows you're casting, you're also hosting, you're also interviewing, you're kind of doing 3 jobs in one. So you have to get that flow going. Like, we have these points on the run of show. Who is bringing up what? Who's bringing us in? Who's bringing us out? And should we come to an interview? Who asks the first question? Who asks the second? It's online. You can't tap. You can't use eye contact. You have to just kind of know, and that comes with the communication ahead of time. You'll notice a lot of people who are newer out, when things get awkward, it's death segments because people don't rehearse them. So that's a big thing to talk about. Your expectations with the game at hand, your passives. Also, the other thing, a great question to ask is there anything special I should know about your style? And that's like any little quirks that they might know or they might notice. And say they don't tell it to you. That's why casting a match or just casting over a VOD ahead of time is so great, because you can figure that out on your own and you can debrief. I mean, if you're a caster, you need to be open to criticism. You need to be able to criticize yourself. You need to be able to also know enough to criticize your peers when you need to, and obviously in a respectful way, but the goal is to grow together. And that's kind of what putting in the prep work, getting together ahead of time is. When it's with your more standard duo, like me, I normally cast with my friend Tanner Metro. And with Tanner, we just always get together an hour before and we just kind of go through the run of show. Like I said, we go through our interview format. We always do the same. He starts the question, I do two, he does another, I do the last, and we close. So it can be very structured in that way. But in way of, I guess, preparing for specific matches, like the kind of notes that I take, I know you probably can't read this whatsoever because my handwriting also sucks, but my illegible, but I write down player names, the roles they're on, and the specific stories of the players. I write down specifics. This is for V1 versus Genji, and I'm like, they bombed out to KCP. Vanity has an IGLing system that V1's based off. Like, else is like, whatever, we don't care about that. But take your notes. I like having paper notes. I don't ever look at them, actually. It's just, it helps get it in my mind. So taking notes is big. If you're someone who likes having it on a screen, that's cool. If you're an iPad note taker, whatever. I mean, it's TSMU University. You're probably college students. You know how to take notes, I'd hope. So just be ready for it, I guess. Sorry, that was a super long-winded answer.
No, for sure. I think this is really, really awesome to hear and get additional insight. And I know you've mentioned that, outside of VCT, you've done a couple tournaments in different games as well.
Mm-hmm.
Beard has a question for you. Do you have a favorite esports to cast, and why?
Valorant, it's just, there's so much to talk about, and it's such a young game. There's so much to talk about. Like CS, I love the game so much. I love casting CS. But it can get stale because it's the same things you know what to expect, but we still need we still learn new things every time that I watch a game of Valorant. And my commentary generally leads color, or color is more analysis, play-by-play is more hype. It's not a hardline role, but I tend to lean to color. And I really love just learning as we watch, learning as the game pans out. There's so much creativity that can be had. The community is, first of all, not that toxic compared to CSGO or Rainbow Six, to be honest. Like, it's a pretty positive community. I know a lot of people in the community. It's a scene I'm very kind of deeply within. And in that, it's also a young game, so it's getting constant updates, constant changes. We're getting new agents, new maps, and there's a lot of support from the developer in way of tournaments. So we have official tournaments with big teams playing often, and we also have smaller tier 2 tournaments often. So there's a lot of events to work compared to NACS, which is kind of dead, sadly. Yeah.
Another question that comes to mind as well is, there's so many things, as you mentioned before, that when it comes to preparing for your next day match or 5 minutes prior to a match, to be able to have that continuous commentating in a sense. Do you do any sort of vocal warm-ups or techniques before commentating?
Depends. Some people do absolutely nothing. Some people do some crazy stuff. I'm kind of in between. It depends on the day. I have allergies and stuff, which really stuffs up my nose and makes it obnoxious. So I always have to take some of that like nasal spray before. And then I do some vocal warm-ups. I don't normally do like a proper vocal warm-up because I don't know how the hell to do that. But I just talk a lot. Maybe it'll be playing a game with friends. I actually really enjoy playing the game I'm casting, like the day I cast it, because it gets me warmed up to it. It gets me warmed up to that. It's probably a placebo thing, but I think that when I go straight from waking up to broadcasting, it kind of it doesn't go well because I kind of need a warm up to be honest. Like I needed time to get talking, to get my kind of my energy rolling, and to get like my understanding of the game rolling in the same way. But in terms of big things I do, lots of water. I don't drink milk. I don't drink caffeine. I don't do anything that has caffeine. I was trying to say I don't drink coffee before the show. And when I eat breakfast, I try and like I know everyone says this, but I try and eat a good breakfast if I can, because oftentimes you'll have like a 9-hour day where you have like very few, if any, at all. What am I trying to say? I'm sorry. You have very few breaks. That's the word I'm looking for. You have very few breaks. You're a contractor. You don't get like mandatory lunch breaks or anything like that. So the max time off you'll have is probably 10 minutes. So just have stuff with you, have snacks if you need it, have water if you need it, and just try and get talking ahead of time. I've heard a lot of people do just read a paragraph, pull up an article from the newspaper, some whatever website, whatever. Just read. Just get your voice going. I also do some tongue twisters. I just Google tongue twisters and I do some of those.
That's awesome. I think that it's really important to be able to find your niche in terms of preparation.
Sure.
So totally, Ellen. I think that's really awesome to hear more insights.
Here, one second. I also know, I just want to bring this up because I think it's funny. Like, I know some casters, Intero drinks a shot of olive oil before he casts. He told me, because I asked some commentators about this. Vancilli does absolutely nothing. No kind of vocal warms. The range is wide. Because this was a question I had for a while, and I asked some other people in the industry. So some people warm up like they're going to sing. If people come from like a theater background, which a surprising amount of casters are theater kids, they'll do that kind of stuff. But most people don't. The olive oil thing is real. I see people in chat getting weird about it. It like gels your throat. Opera singers used to like drink eggs before they did opera, like raw egg.
Oh my gosh, the more you know. I didn't know about this. When I heard about the olive oil right now, I was like, okay, well, that's really intense. I don't know if I'd be able to down a shot of olive oil, but shouts out to them. Yeah, I think this is really insightful because for a lot of people, they just think that, no one really has a method. It's just people talking. But however, there is a lot of preparation. There is a lot of practicing before, you get into that stream, you get into, being online and being able to just talk. For me, like, I can't talk for that long without feeling like, God, I need to get a glass of water before I start losing my voice. So nothing but respect for you guys in that sense. Moving over to another question. Chloe Heim, I might have been pronouncing it properly. But what is your opinion on the impact of social media presence in the esports world?
I was not expecting a real question from Chloe. She's a friend of mine. She actually had an insightful question. Thank you, Chloe. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. I probably can't. I'm a poster of a certain variety. I just post a bunch of trash memes on my Twitter. Everyone has their own personal brand. It depends on what people's kind of brand is, but you have to create something. You can't just be funny shout guy. There's a dime a dozen casters who brand themselves. Okay, I'm like hyping myself up at being able to talk, and I can't even talk for this interview. But there's so many people who brand themselves as like the hype guy, who's super good at hype. But you need something specific. I think as a caster, Twitter presence is huge. So much of esports is on Twitter. You need to make a Twitter. I hated Twitter at first. Now I'm horribly addicted, and I can't get off the platform. But Twitter presence is really big. Just post about something. Post about the scene. Get followers. Follow pros. Tweet things that are relatable. I can't give you the success sauce in way of how to brand yourself on Twitter, because I mean there's whole people's jobs that are about that. But having a Twitter presence is huge. It's also a great way to network and find people. I mean, I was talking earlier in this about how reaching out to random people and cold calling is big. A lot of that is on Twitter. When I was early on, I set myself up a Twitter alert for looking for caster, and I would just be an absolute gremlin, and I would go and I would find all those opportunities, and I'd hunt people down, and I'd DM them and send them my reel, be like, hey, hey, what's up, and do that stuff. I think Twitch streaming is really good for casters as well, because people who see you on stream, a lot of them can see you as a personality, but if you show personality on broadcast, which I think you have to. Different casters disagree. Yes, the broadcast is not about you, but you should be an additive element. And in adding to that, when it's a stomp, when it's a bad game to watch, because sometimes there are bad games of Valorant. There are games that are not that exciting because one team is eviscerating them. You have to find a way to make it fun, and that comes from your personality. That comes from from you being funny or you being very insightful or whatever that is. But you need to find a way to channel that, because if people are like, "Hey, this person is funny" on broadcast, They don't want to only be able to see you on broadcast. Try and stream. Try and do that. Try and create a Discord, whatever. I mean, I'm sure it's the same advice for anyone who wants to go into content creation and that kind of stuff, and that you should probably stream. You should probably make videos. If you're a color caster, you should probably try and make analytical content. Grow your influence in your sphere. Make yourself an expert on the scene if you can. A lot of that is through social media and by posting and by being insightful and just giving your opinion. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes people will hate you, but just being genuine is really great. And a lot of that comes from social media, which I guess is not really genuine, but whatever the genuine fake you is, that can be what you sell to people.
Yeah, and on the note of social media, I feel like, again, in different communities, it's all the same in terms of hearing toxicity, right? Being able to be, that front-facing person on camera. People are going to know you. People are going to recognize you. And of course, that comes with trolls. That comes with people who aren't so friendly, aren't so wholesome. So in that sense, like, how do you navigate through that, or how do you deal with that type of stuff if you've ever experienced it?
I'm going to first of all say this as a caster. Yes, the community liking you is good. When you are loved by the community, when you're respected by the community, that's great. You like that, but you're never going to appease everyone. And you should not be trying to, because good commentary shouldn't be pandering. The people's validation that you should be looking for is your colleagues within the scene. Ask people, have them review a VOD of you. Have them try and learn from you. Try and learn from them, because the best thing that you can do is talk with someone who knows what they're talking about. The dynamics of specific passes, most casual viewers won't understand that stuff, won't get that stuff, and won't be able to provide you good things. Someone saying KEKW casters in Twitch chat isn't useful. It might make you feel bad. It might make you feel sad. Early on, that happened to me. I had my first big shock when I did that Game Changers event. And I was like, to be honest, my commentary kind of blew the first day. I was very new and I got a very big opportunity and I didn't do the best of job with it. I I obviously wasn't trying to do a poor job. It's just I was new and I made mistakes. I think sometimes you can glean good piece of information from community feedback. When I review VODs of my self-casting, I leave Twitch chat on. Because I want to hear if they say NA caster, if they say KEKW caster, if something pisses them off, I'm interested to see when it is. I'm not necessarily going to change that because their word isn't gospel. At the end of the day, it's your own self-analysis. You're a freelancer. So long as you are getting more gigs, you're probably doing a good enough job. So there's a lot of other metrics. I think it's good to stay attuned when you're completely disconnected from what the community thinks of you, what the community thinks. You can become kind of on your own island because you should never think you're perfect because you're not. You never are. I'm not a perfect caster. I'm nowhere near one. I'm not as good as I could be. And no one is, to be honest. There's always room for growth, and it's about having that growth mindset. So you have to keep improving, and part of that is being open to criticism. That was a very hard part for me starting casting. I don't want to say I had an ego, but I tend to be a confident person, and I was confident in that. And I had a couple reality checks early on, and you have to keep yourself grounded. The second you grow a big ego and think you're hot something, you're gonna start to falter and you're gonna stagnate because you always have to be improving. Because like I said earlier, it's a very hungry market. Lots of people want your job. Lots of people want where I am right now, which is why I need to constantly be improving to the best I can.
Yeah, and I think that's really great insight in terms of being able to navigate through the community itself. Just a quick reminder to everyone who is tuned in right now, if you're still interested in asking any questions, please send those burning questions to us. Hop onto the TSM Discord. So if you have a question, head over to the Ask Stream questions here and ask away. We'll be able to ask them for the remaining of the stream. I think moving on to more things revolving around esports commentating. I guess my question to you here is, what if I want to be, a caster myself? If I wanted to improve my own casting skills, how would you recommend I practice and look to improve?
Find a VOD of the game you want to cast. It can be anything. You don't have to be a god player, but you need to be knowledgeable of the game. Even if you're a play-by-play, even if you're someone who's focused on the hype, you still need to be knowledgeable on the game. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I'm not a crazy high-ranking player. I've only ever played in amateur events. I've never been a pro. A lot of casters have. I'm like plat in Valorant, and I'm not good at Counter-Strike. But what I do is I watch a lot of pro VODs. I watch a lot of that, so I have the knowledge and I have that game knowledge. So first of all, prerequisite, understand the game you want to cast. That also does grow as you grow, so whatever. But find a VOD of that game. If it's with casters, mute them. You don't care about them. If it doesn't have casters, that's great, because casting with GameStown is a lot better. Find a friend. I mean, some people solo cast. I think they're psychopaths. Solo casting isn't inherently bad, especially in games like CS. You will start out solo casting. It sucks. Good luck. That blows. Tough shit. But as you start to go, I think casting with a friend, finding someone, if they've casted before, if they haven't, whatever, cool. That again comes back to networking, to finding someone, cast over that VOD, record it. You're going to hate listening to your voice, but you're going to have to get used to it. I still hate hearing my own voice, but I just suffer. So watch back that VOD, figure out what you went wrong. What don't you like? What doesn't sound good? Pick one thing. Pick two things even. What are the two things you want to improve on? Go into your next practice cast or your next broadcast with that in mind. Every cast I come into something. Right now, my improvement point for my next thing is pacing. I'm talking fast right now. I tend to talk fast when I'm talking about something I'm passionate about, and I'm casting, especially when it's a game that's very hype. I get passionate and I start talking too fast from time to time. Hype doesn't equal pace of speed. Hype doesn't equal loudness. You need to be able to enable that in different days. So that's my improvement point that I'm focusing on right now from what I've noticed from previous VODs and from advice my colleagues have given me. Yeah, I think that's that. But just cast with someone. Doesn't have to be on a real broadcast. Just do it. Just practice, record, watch it back. Watching it back is the best thing you can do for yourself, especially when you're starting out. And also, like I said, reach out to casters who are bigger in the scene. Ask someone to review your VOD. I had Simo, who works a lot of Valorant shows. He reviewed my VOD early on. I thought it was a good VOD. He tore it to shreds, and that kind of felt bad, but it was very beneficial because I learned a lot of lessons from that.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. And I've heard this so many times, and when I watch a stream and I hear other people talking about it, they're like, well, this person isn't high range, this person's only gold, and whatever, right? And being able to show that you don't have to be the best player, but you just have to have that knowledge is really important for people to understand. So it's not like you have to be immortal to be a good caster or an S tier caster. So really good, insightful. And really exciting to hear your insights on that, and the fact that again being able to give feedback to yourself and to others as well while you're in that space. I think it's great to have that collaboration, because something might look freaking awesome on your end and someone be like, this is shit, excuse my French. So being able to get constructive feedback, I think anywhere, whether it's within the workspace or in any space, whether it's commentating or biz dev, whatever it is, being able to hear other people's insight is extremely helpful. So really, really excited to hear that that is something that you guys, or for you specifically, hone in on. So I have an additional question from Kite. Kite is asking, what's been your biggest learning moment or challenge while casting?
That's a tough one. There's a lot. Like I said, with the VOD review process, you're always trying to find a learning moment. I think one of the bigger moments for me is I didn't specifically learn this from anyone, but it's something that a lot of people talk about, and it's very important. As a caster, you have to have a lot of trust in your co-caster, especially when it's an online event. And that's hard to say. Early on, I worked with some people, a lot of people who honestly maybe didn't fully carry their weight, and that led me to get kind of this complex of not trust my co-caster. I overcovered things. I overcarried. I tried to be doing kind of the job of the play-by-play and the job of the color simultaneously. I was trying to do so much. If you're going to cast with someone, sometimes you'll get a shitty partner. That happens. Unlucky. Go next. But you just need to have some trust in them. When you give them a pass, you have to trust that they're going to do things right. And also, it's just earnestly listening to them. Don't zone out. I struggle with this because I have the attention span of like a small rat. But you really have to try your damnedest to listen to your co-commentator. Like, I have to keep my hands busy when I cast, so I don't ignore what my co-caster is saying and my thoughts drift. It still happens sometimes on long days, and I'm like, oh shit, what did they just say? But it's like earnestly listening to your co-caster and having trust in them, because it's not about you, it's not about your co-caster, it's not about any of that. It's about giving the game justice and doing justice to the game. And That sounds really preachy, and it is. But it's like, think about it if you're a player. You are playing this big tournament. You're super hyped. Maybe you made it far. Maybe this is your first big run, and you look back at the VOD and the casting sucks. That doesn't make you feel good. You need to do justice by those players. That's a mentality I've developed, right? When I do a call, when I make something hype, I want to be able to do that game justice and to give that moment justice.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to be able to give the game itself the justice that it needs. So, and moving over in terms of going back to your preparation and your day-to-day process before you get into a game, do you get nervous or anxious before going live on broadcasts? And if so, how have you overcame any nerves that wow, I can't say anything, nerves you've had casting events?
Yeah. Someone in chat just had a really insightful answer to someone's question. Sorry. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I've always been someone who's like had anxiety. It's been an issue for me. When I was at school, I got really nervous, and it's something that I personally have had to try and cope with, and that's with dealing with my own stuff. But talking about, I guess, stage fright, even for someone who's pretty nervous, I've never gotten stage fright. I've always been able to perform, and I've always been able to do that. I did I'll admit to it. I did some theater stuff growing up, and it was something that I was able to do pretty successfully without too much stress. For commentary, bigger gigs make me anxious still sometimes. When I go out and I know there's going to be like 30,000 people watching, that makes me nervous. That makes me stressed out. But it's a matter of learning to channel that anxiety into what you do. Channel that anxiety into energy. And it also falls back to your co-caster, right? Like, you need to be able to have them not just be a coworker, but a friend, I guess. And someone like, you're just going, if all else fails, just think, it's me, it's my friend, we're going to talk about the video game. We're going to talk about the damn video game. We're going to do it the best we can. And it's also about kind of hyping yourselves up. If you start feeling emo about your casting, because pretty much during breaks, me and my co-caster, unless one of us has to like sprint to the bathroom or something, we'll be like, well, how'd that game go? Oh, well, that was, besides talking about the game at hand, it's like, how did our cast go? How did we feel about that? What went well? What didn't? And it's not about criticizing each other whatsoever, because you don't want to criticize. You don't want to bring the vibes down. It's the same as when you're a player. You have to keep the energy up. You have to keep the vibes up, because if your mental gets shaken, you can lose out. There have been casts, I think of one in particular, where I was doing a show, one best of 3, and I just wasn't feeling it. And I let myself get emo, and I kind of inted the rest of the show because I didn't have a good mental. It's about just staying focused. If you have a screw up, people won't remember. People are there to watch the games. People are there to do that. It's not about you at the end of the day. You're just trying to be additive. So it's one part channeling your energy into the energy you give in the cast, channeling that anxiety into the energy you give in the cast. In part, it's being able to rely on your co-caster as a friend, and it's a good person to just kind of fall back on. And that also comes back to the trust point I was making. It's a lot less anxious when, if you stumble, if you do something wrong, your co-caster will pick up. That's a conversation you should have. And that's something that can relieve a lot of anxiety. If there's ever a moment that goes wrong, don't be afraid to correct yourself on stream. Everyone makes mistakes. I think one of the worst blunders some casters make is acting like they're an expert. If you were the world's godliest player, the world's smartest analyst, you'd probably be coaching, or you'd probably be in that server. You will make mistakes sometimes. It happens. Even the best casters make mistakes. Sometimes it's about owning that. Sometimes it's about ignoring that if it's something small. So that again, a classic Mimi answer, 3 different options to one thing. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important because everyone has their own quirks and their own methods of being able to deal with that such anxiety. I know you've mentioned that you have worked with a lot of casters as well. You have those co-casters every time you hop into a game. Do you have any specific commentators that inspire you or that you look up to, and what makes them special to you?
Pansy. She's a fucking legend, to be honest, to be straight up. I was a huge fan of her in CSGO. I watched her cast when I was little, and I was looking at the majors and shit and stuff. She was always so cool. She's the only pretty much female commentator in found there's not that many female commentators in this game, in most games, to be honest. It's different in some different ones. FPS, there's no one. I'm the only woman who works the VCT shows in NA. It's just me. Before me, there was nobody. So she's someone I've always aspired to. She has a really insane range. Her calls are great. Her analysis is fantastic. I think she just has such a voice for it, and she's been doing it for years. She's incredibly practiced. She is flawless, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan, to be honest. So she's pretty cool. In terms of people in North America, Sean Gares, he's very smart. He was a pro player himself. I think he does a great job at picking what is the best point of analysis, because there's a lot to talk about when you're trying to be a color commentator, and he always has the right one. I think if I had to say what makes him special, it's just his insight and the way I feel like he can mesh with most co-casters. He's a fairly low energy color, I would say, like low hype energy, but he can still really bring it up. And it's that range on top of the analysis that is great, because I mean, energy management is everything when it comes to casting, and it's one of the hardest things to get used to. And like for me, I'm different. I'm a pretty, I mean, you can probably tell when I'm just talking now, I'm a pretty high energy person. I'm pretty hyper. And when I cast, it's no different. I bring the hype, and it's about kind of trying to balance that. And I think he does a very good job at it.
Yeah, touching base on players that have transitioned over to casting, we see in a lot of different games, whether it's in Valorant with Sean Garris, going from CS over to casting Valorant now. That's really awesome from him. And LCS, you'll see a lot of players coming in and giving insights. My question to you is, like, do you think that players, after they, finish, being that pro player, would that be like another avenue that most players should look into? Just knowing that, again, they have that insight, they have the experience, they know what's going on in the player's head when they're, there on stage. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Sure, that's an interesting one. Lots of different people have very strong opinions on this topic of what makes a good caster. In my opinion, I think a pro is always going to be, or a former pro is always going to be a very, very good color, because they have the insight, they have the knowledge. But the thing is, you have to be well spoken. You have to know the energy management. Casting, when you're a color, isn't about that. I've worked with former pros that weren't it. You need to be able to do that. You have to put the same amount of practice in. It's not something that can just be a retirement home for pros where you hop out of pro play, you're instantly a good commentator. I think the desk is different. I think as an analyst, most former pros, maybe not most, a lot of former pros, especially IGLs, make very good analysts, because when you have a desk host that can kind of shepherd them, that can kind of herd them, point them in the right direction, ask them the questions, and they can just kind of be like an analysis machine that you just insert question, output thing. Casting is a lot more free flowing. Just knowing what you're talking about won't make it, because a lot of it is a structure, it's a synergy with your duo, it's the energy management, it's all that. And I think pro players have an easier job at the door in way of having that energy, or excuse me, not that energy, having that insight. But it's about bringing the rest in, because I'm the other way. I've done a lot of casting. I'm used to the casting parts. It's more about me keeping up to date with the metas. I have to watch a lot of VODs. I have to watch a lot of tournaments. I spend probably more time than I spend off air, playing the game, watching the game, reviewing VODs, learning about the game, because that is still incredibly important, and keeping up with the stories of players. What teams are good, what teams aren't, what are their storylines? It goes back to what I was talking about with prep work. I think that there's a tit for tat with it, and it just kind of depends. There's been some great pro players that end up casters. There's been some questionable moments too.
Talking about ranges and how everyone has their own range, you mentioned you lean more towards color commentary. What draws you towards that over play-by-play?
I started out as a play-by-play monkey. When I first started casting, I was like, big word, go boom, me say word, very fun. And I was a fan of that, and I liked that. And then I guess, okay, I'm gonna be very honest here. A lot of the color casters I was working with, I didn't like their color commentary. I thought it kind of sucked. And then I started being like, okay, I think I could do a good job at that. So I started doing it more. It's something I got used to. I've always thought I had a fairly good, like, thinking about the game. I don't know. So I leaned into that kind of out of necessity, because there was, I feel like in the lower level, you can find some good play-by-plays. It's harder to find some good colors when you're working like the tier 3, tier 4, like trenches who mega lol tournaments. It's a lot harder to find people with that good insight. So it was what I started to lean toward. It was also kind of circumstance. I still play-by-play. I'm not a hardline color caster. I in my duo with Tanner, we're very hybrid. I play-by-play some rounds. If I get in certain passes, I'll take the round. I'll play-by-play. I'm fine. I'm comfortable doing each. And I think if you're a caster that's big, being able to do both is huge. It's a lot harder to get gigs if you're shoehorned into one specific thing. Flexibility is huge. If you can interview, if you can host, if you can play-by-play, if you can color, it's a lot easier to make it in esports. And I'm not saying I've made it, because I haven't whatsoever. I'm still very new, but flexibility is everything. Diversify your abilities. But I think play-by-play draws a certain crowd, color draws a certain crowd. It is what it is. Both are very necessary.
Right. And in terms of just challenges in everyone's career, I'm sure everyone runs into these, but what has been the most challenging part of your career as a caster? Like, how did you overcome those challenges, and were there any takeaways you still apply to your work today?
What are the big challenges that I have had to overcome? My mental was a big one. I talked about that a little bit when I was answering the anxiety question. I'm an intrinsically anxious person. I'm outgoing, but it takes a lot from me when I have to be putting out that energy and when I have to be front facing to people. I think it's funny, but I worked a customer service job for like four years before I did esports, and that was my thing. I think that helped a lot because I'm a very shy person, and that helped me to kind of break out of that a little bit. You'll find a lot of casters actually are pretty shy people when they're off broadcast, but I think kind of breaking out of that shell and breaking out of my nerves and just focusing on the game was a big thing for me, and something that's obviously still very important and for a lot of people is important. I think it was also a matter of just starting to find duos, starting to find people that I've really enjoyed working with, because I've been through a number of people, and I'm not going to look down. I'm not going to say anything bad about anyone, because everyone I've worked with has been amazing, and I've learned lessons from them, and I've learned different things. So it's always about learning from your peers and them learning from you respectively, but it's about finding somebody you feel comfortable with. I feel good in the pairing with Tanner I have right now, but I still am a person that is flexible, and I take other gigs, and I will work with anyone. When you're new, work with as many people as possible. I'm still trying to work with as many people. Like I said, I am Sully's 17. I'm 18. We're the only two young people who work the VCT in North America. Everyone else is old and has been doing other shows. Even Sully was he did a lot of CS. I'm the only person who started in Valorant in this game. So for me, it's a lot of making up for lost time in that I'm trying to do as many tournaments as I can. I'm trying to work with as many people as I can, so I can build that diversity of knowledge that people who have managed to be more established, people like DDK, like Dusk, who've been working in the scene for 10 years, have been able to build. Same with Van Silly. Like, there's most people who are casting Valorant right now have been in it for a while, and they've been able to diversify it. So by trying to work with as many people as possible, I'm trying to build to that same point.
How much time do you spend outside of events, like researching Valorant in general, just to stay up to date? I know that's something that you mentioned is part of your preparation, and getting ready to be that commentator when you go into that game face day. How much time do you spend there?
I'm going to be honest, I'm a loser. I don't leave the house. Touching grass is bad for your career, kids. No, jokes aside, you have to put in a certain amount of time. Yeah, you have to put in a certain amount of time to be able to get it done. Like, I try and do my once weekly pain and suffering session where I go back and I watch a couple VODs, and that's where I kind of get my big improvement point. It also depends on the lulls. There's some weeks where I'm just busy as hell, and I'm working event to event to event. Sunday, I fly out for a LAN. I work that LAN for 3 days. Then I fly to a different LAN. Then I work that LAN for 2 weeks. So it'll be like ages till I get home and have time to do any of this stuff. But when you have free time, it's pick a VOD, watch a VOD, be able to get used to that, learn from the teams, learn what's going on. Play the damn game that you're casting. I know it doesn't sound that crazy, but staying up to date, just playing it, you learn a lot, and you can get some insight as a player, especially if you do play at a higher rank. I don't play at a particularly high rank. I guess plat is like top 10%. Big flex. But I guess just playing as much as possible, just watching as much as possible is great, but you don't have to have a grinder. Please have a social life. Please go outside and touch grass.
Touching grass is really important. So
yeah, mental health is really important for this. Don't lock yourself in your room. It is for everything.
Yeah, and I wanted to circle back about, your career and, having that communication with fellow, commentators as well and anyone in the
Mhm.
production side. How do you handle like rate discussions for potential events you might commentate for? Do you have any advice or learnings that you can
Like
share?
on negotiating gigs or like booking events?
Yeah, booking and being able to, work with these like hiring managers who are looking
Mhm,
for commentators. Do you have
mhm.
any advice or learnings that you can share from your time casting that might help other casters handling that tough conversation?
Yeah, I despise negotiating. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It is my least favorite part of my job. Um, I'm not a fan. Once you get big enough to get signed to an agency, it gets very easy. But early on, you'll have to. It's a matter of knowing your own worth. That comes from knowing your own worth. Wow, smart point. But also from talking to your peers. Ask your peers what you make. I know in America, especially, people, it's kind of what's the word? A taboo to ask people how much money they make. But in freelancing, you kind of have to. Don't let yourself get scammed. And the other thing is there's no casting union. Don't undercut people. You suck if you undercut people intentionally. You have to try and not do that because there are rates that are fairly standard that people make at different levels, and there are a lot of TOs. Honestly, casting sucks. Very few people. Okay, casting doesn't suck. I love it very much, but it sucks in a way of making it a living and making it a job because there are a million tournaments that'll pay you dog nothing, very bad payment that is like not reasonable for the amount of work you put in. And there are very few that will actually pay you reasonably. I can think of like 3 tournament organizers in North America for Valorant that like actually pay like an industry standard reasonable rate. So talk to your peers, figure out what they're making, figure that out too. Be hardline. Sometimes you'll have to step away from a gig if they can't pay you what you deserve, but that sometimes it has to happen. If you are someone who is up and coming, I can't speak to other games, but if you're up and coming in Valorant, if you're up and coming in CS, DM me on Twitter. I will tell you what my day rate is. I will tell you what my day rate has been throughout different times. I don't I'm obviously not going to say that stuff like perfectly publicly, but I am perfectly fine to chat about people about rates because I don't want people who are starting out to scam themselves. That's what I did starting out. I messaged people, I messaged other people, figured out what they were making because you have to figure out how much you can charge and what is reasonable. And that can be a tough discussion to have. Negotiation. I'm not going to try and tell you about like what negotiation skills because I don't know, but chatting with other people in the scene is very important to figure out what you are worth, and just knowing that yourself too is of the utmost important. Don't undersell yourself because free labor, it happens, but try and avoid it if you can.
Yeah, I think that that's the one thing that is pretty endemic within like the space is
Mhm.
the taboo ness of being able to talk about how much you get paid. I think people can feel embarrassed or they can feel shy about it, but I
Mhm.
think it's really important to be able to be open and talk about how much you make because you're not trying to flex. You're trying to not only help yourself out to get
Yeah.
insights from others, you're helping others understand. Holy crap, I'm getting paid a significantly less amount, and we all definitely just want success for everyone else. So, yeah, shouts out to you there. I think that's really important to be able to talk about your pay and everything on that end. I have a question from Kite. Kite asked, you mentioned, your mental like up from slipping. How do you actually do that? Like, what is that process that you keep yourself on track?
Like mental health wise, are we
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm not a perfect example. I don't think I have the perfect lifestyle right now, to be honest. It's something I'm trying to work on. One thing that has helped me is trying to take a walk every morning. There's a coffee shop like a mile from my house. I walk, probably spend too much money on it, but I walk and I just get myself some coffee, walk home. Just getting outside is so crucial. Esports, especially with the grind culture, there's always something more you can do. There's always another thing you can do. When you're a freelancer, you have to figure out when to cut yourself off and how to balance things on your own. Your employer isn't going to tell you how to do it. You're not going to get paid off the hours you work. You're only getting paid off gigs. You could grind a crazy amount, but you'd grind yourself to death within a year. So it's striking that balance. For me personally, I guess like a day for me is I try and I always try and do like one thing a day that can help me out, but I try not to go crazy with it because there's different things. Like there's the practicing on the back end, booking new events, and actually working events, reviewing, and then the financial stuff too, which sucks because you're a freelancer. I don't know how to do taxes. It's going to be hellish this year with just being a freelancer. So it's like kind of picking out that thing. What are we going to work on today? What is the thing to improve on, or what is the multiple things to improve on, to work through that. It's kind of about you personally. How fast can you work through things? How fast can you do that? For me, I've made a lot of amazing friends through the industry. So even when I can't go out and chat with people, I try and just talk to people on Discord. I try and just be social, be friendly with people. And especially when you have friends who are in the industry, I play games. I am friends with a lot of other casters, and you can just talk about what's going on. It doesn't always have to be something crazy. It can be casual, and that's great. So finding that community is big. Go outside, eating well, exercise. I mean, the obvious stuff, but like, it's about striking that balance. I think it's the same with, I mean, you've probably asked this for other people who have done interviews here, anyone in esports, because a lot of jobs in esports aren't a traditional 9 to 5, and it's weird hours. And that's something that you kind of have to balance on your own. You have to find times. My sleep schedule is weird because of this, because I have a lot of events that end. I probably go to bed at 2 a.m. and wake up at like 10, but I just kind of push that back, and I try and like go on a morning walk, go outside, do something, talk with your family, get outside with your friends, all the normal mental health stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to be able to take care of your mental health, as you know, mental health is important in terms of longevity when you want to continue your career,
Mhm.
the grind that you're in. As we are coming to a close to the Q&A, Mimi, I wanted to see if you had any shout outs or anything that you'd like to say to the audience today.
I don't know if I have any shout outs directly, but I guess just thank you for listening to me ramble for a while. If you want to stay up to date with me, my Twitter is, where is it? Oh, I got the right direction first try. Let's go. It's right there. It's aEvilcat on all the social platforms and all that jazz. So that'd be pretty cool if you want to see some epic shit posts on Twitter. That exists. Besides that, next time I'll be casting is going to be on LAN for Valorant. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. And all that information will be on my Twitter. Again, my DMs are open on Twitter. I also have like a Discord you can join. If you want to DM me on Discord, DM me on Twitter, don't email me, please. I don't reply to emails quickly enough, but I will try and get back to you. I will try and give you a reasonable answer, and I can help out. If you're new in the scene, specifically if you're new in the scene for Valorant or CS, I'm always open to questions. I'm always open to help people out.
Yeah, you guys know where to go. At aEvilcat on Twitter, and be able to, if you have any additional questions, send over some DMs, send over some messages over to her. And everyone that is currently attending and tuning in today, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate that you come here and you enjoy the experience and be able to hang out with us at the same time. I want to thank Mimi for your time. You know, that was amazing and insightful interview itself, just getting to know you and getting to know your background, and just giving people advice in terms of how to be a better person and how to be a better commentator. And just to give everyone a heads up, September 8th at 5 p.m. PST, we will have a very special guest as well. One of my colleagues here at TSM, Christian Lee, who is the Global Sales Executive at TSM FDX. So be sure to follow the channel so you know when we're live, and reminder to follow us and join our Discord, discord.gg/TSMU. Thanks, everyone. Farewell.